that's cause for people to go out in the street and fucking rebel.
When he's sitting in his golden palace, he'll regret with all his blood money.
I remember one night we took acid, and
Love it.
And I think that the truth is a great weapon that an artist has.
What a run you guys have been on, the whole crew. I mean, have you had any opportunity to take stock of it and get a sense of what's been happening in the Kneecap world?
I suppose we do have moments when we're together, going down the red carpet, for example, in the BAFTAs, talking to Edward Norton or fucking whoever it is talking about the movie. We have moments like that there that kind of gives us an opportunity to think about the kind of grand scale of things, and like how much the movies kind of went beyond Ireland for the movie especially, and the music. But obviously the movie kind of helped us in a sense to get the music to places that maybe we thought wouldn't have been possible.
Right. I mean, it's a world you probably, I don't know if you, when you were growing up, you thought this was going to be your ticket to see the whole world and to see it this way.
yeah, I don't think any of us could have thought that it would be our passport to the world. Really, we're just back from the Arctic last week. We went up to northern Finland.
Yeah.
We were doing some TV show there, so we got to build an ice igloo
Yeah.
and stay in it overnight and go fucking ice fishing, just like plunging a hole in the middle of a river, and we camped on top of the river and got to see some of the northern lights and got our eyelashes frozen together. It's just experiences like this that kind of come off the back of doing music. So it's taken us to places we've never even thought of we would get to. Like,
I grew up in Canada, so the ice fishing thing is all too familiar. I was just in Greenland, and you were in Greenland as well. Did you head up to Greenland?
No, we were actually in Finland.
That was Finland. Okay, all right, cool.
Our manager put out Greenland just taking the piss because I think Donald Trump said something about
Yeah.
owning Greenland or buying Greenland, so we're kind of having a wee dig at Donald Trump
I
there.
love it.
But we were in Finland.
Oh, I love it. I love that. So much of us who are inspired either by punk or post-punk or even hip-hop dance scene, it's very localized, and it's these scenes. And so these bands that most of the public will never hear of inspired so many. And then somehow there's this universality in your story. And Kneecap has become this, I understand that people, as you said, all over the world are starting to connect to what's happening there. And I on any level, is that a surprise to you guys that it has resonated with people around the world, even though struggle is universal?
I mean, I think like when punk music was coming about in whatever the 70s and the 60s, 70s, 80s, it always comes at a time, that type of music, when people are sick of like the mainstream like pop music or the popular music or popular culture then, and people usually gravitate towards something that is going against the grain. And I think we're a part of this new wave. It's not we're punk music, but the ethos of punk, of like looking for something different that like has a different has more substance to it, maybe. And maybe that's something, that an element that punk maybe was missing, is something that we're trying to offer, is this cultural aspect to it, and like the language. And I think that's the reason why maybe it does resonate with people in Ireland and Scotland and America, and going to Australia, here in New Zealand, the Maoris, because there is more than one language in the world. There's more than English, and like all the major languages, English and Spanish.
Yeah.
And like there is a certain sense that once all these languages disappear, we're going to lose a certain perspective on life and lose a way to communicate. And that's the way it is all around the world, because there's obviously so many languages. And with colonization happening, when it did happen, it was the same story. The same thing happened in India as it did in Kenya, as it did in Ireland, as it did in Scotland. So the fact that we're talking about the stuff we talk about and presenting music the way we do, I think that's why it resonates, because we all have a similar history, even though we come from completely different places.
Yeah.
Probably can't even speak to each other, but we still have that common shared history. So I think, especially with the movie, and with the music as well, but the movie especially, we've seen this kind of, we've talked to people about this, how this resonates with them, and not only makes them think about Ireland, but makes them think about their own relationship with their own language and their own culture.
What do you think are the confluence of events that have to happen for you to be the guys to do this?
there's thousands of years of Irish speakers who refuse not to speak Irish and who refuse to be downtrodden, and especially in the west coast of Ireland, there in the Gaeltacht areas, where the language was kept alive through brutalisation, through colonisation, through famine, through all types of attacks and indemnities. Like they kept it alive, and so we're standing on the shoulders of giants, and people are proud to speak the language again, and they want to see different avenues for the language,
Right.
and people are taking them down weird and wonderful avenues instead of just teaching. So it's not confined to the four walls of the classroom anymore. It's a social language. It's spoken in an urban setting, and like we've said it before, if a language is going to be alive, it has to be alive in all aspects of life. You have to be able to talk about drugs, you have to be able to talk about sex, you have to be able to talk about anything that you can talk about in all these majority languages.
I got to tell you, when I watched the film, I love the film for many, many reasons, but there were a couple of things that happened in the film that I did that old school spit your drink up when you took the guy that played Bobby Sands and you called him Bobby Sandals. And I couldn't believe.
But I do think this kind of, whatever way you call it, memification, or like putting it into a different context that isn't so serious, is a means of the current generation to kind of understand it, to make light of it. And like, we always talk about this, like when we chat away to people from the Shankill, like people from the Protestant backgrounds, like we're never afraid to take the piss out of each other.
What you're saying there about the Bobby Sandal was one, especially the sensitivities around that. If you said that to someone in the generation right before us, that could have got you into like a lot of trouble.
Yeah.
And I think that we're the generation now where you have to kind of take the piss out of it to take the sting out of the past. So I think that's what gave us that courage to be able to make those jokes, and the jokes about the Brighton Bomb Hotel.
Below Me Like a Brighton Bomb is another one of those.
It's a good one. I think them two jokes are like a reflection on where we stand. Like, we're not here to make jokes about one side.
Yeah.
The fact that we have the Bobby Sandals jokes and then the Brighton Bomb joke is like two sensitive subjects, but like one is kind of from our own community and one's from like another from England.
Yeah.
But that kind of sums up where we stand. It's like we're not here to pick one side. We're here to kind of dissect it all. Nobody is safe from getting the piss taken out of them. That's for sure.
How has the community come around you? The music community. I know, Weller and Noel Gallagher. There were photos, but this idea of game recognizing game for you, have you experienced some of that in people coming around you?
I just think having them lads come up to you in the dressing room after playing a gig, and it is a bit still surreal. Like people you've been listening to all your life, and these icons, and I think for probably for everyone, even people who have been doing music for a while, there's always them people that you meet who you think are fucking, they must have a halo around them.
Yeah.
And it's so kind of grounding, and to meet them and see that they're just fucking sound cunts as well, like, and they're there with their families, and they're like the children think that they're cringy, and they're like,
Yeah.
They've got that thing that like with dads have. I have a wee daughter and of my own and my stepson and that, and just seeing that they have that as well, and that their lives isn't always that fucking version that you had of them in their head.
Yeah.
Is a great thing, and it's a grounding thing. And like, one of the funny things that happens was we had a phone call with Elton John, and he wanted to do a wee podcast with us, and I was getting a phone call from one of my mates at the time, and I was like, "Sorry, I'm going to have to phone you back." He said, "Well, what's wrong? You told me before." I said, "Elton John's about to phone me here," and he was like, "Yeah." So he went on talking, thinking I was taking the piss, and I was like, "No, actually, Elton John's on the other line."
That's something that I think. I suppose every artist likes to think they're humble, and I mean we all like to think we're humble, and I think, though, I'm sure most of them are, but I think for us, we're genuinely humble. No, I think for us, because we started off doing stuff. Started off writing and performing in Irish. We put the first song out, Character. We had no expectations that anybody would be into it or be interested in it. And I think that's the kind of aura we've carried with us throughout the whole Kneecap journey. Yeah. And like, we'll meet people like Noel or Elton, and we still won't believe it, because we're just like, maybe it's just this kind of post-colonial like hangover that we don't think we're able for it, and like people won't be interested in our language because it's not as good. So every time it happens, we're surprised. But then, even though we could list out all the things that happened, and you shouldn't be surprised because this happened, and we met Noel and we met Elton and all this stuff. But it's that thing we carry with us still because we're down in Irish. I'm sure maybe one day we'll say we'll not think that and we'll be arrogant cunts.
Yeah.
But not yet.
When did you? And I wonder if the three of you came upon it roughly the same time. But we're in that first era where people are really talking about the idea of generational trauma and cellular trauma. It's a relatively new thing in the mainstream, and you have talked about it. There's that great moment in the film as well. When did that become part of your consciousness that, oh, maybe there's a name for what I'm feeling or why I act the way I act?
I remember one night we took acid, and
Love it.
I was in the
That's
bathroom.
the
And
end of the story.
fucking, I think a lot of people realize it when they're on acid, just having this kind of massive ego death and staring in the toilet and seeing like it was like weaving through every cell and seeing where all of the mad things that happened to the generations before and the generations before and having to work through it. And I was like, oh fuck, right, this is just an unbroken line that it does get passed down, and those traumas do stick there as a kind of, so if you get bit by a dog, the next generations know not to go near fucking
Yeah.
vicious dogs or whatever.
Yeah.
It's not that's just to simplify it, but that's one
Yeah,
that's one of
the
the
Brits, the
places
dogs.
they could come from.
Yeah.
But then obviously you see it in real life happening as well, where um our parents lived through the troubles, and we've had family members incarcerated and family members killed, and suffer torture or whatever at the hands of an oppressor. And that the fear that they go through, and the fear that you feel as a child, kind of just in day-to-day stuff, going out to town.
I find it really interesting when artists, and there's something happening in the north of Ireland, but just Ireland in general, where artists have never ever seemed to stray too far from telling the truth about what happened. Like it just seems very connected to the culture.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I remember outside my house, whenever we were in the early 90s, just when we were going to school, you would see the British Army would be outside, and they would have these big fucking automatic rifles and snipers. And as an 8-year-old, you want to go over and say, "Here, let me look down your rifle," and they would oblige because they want to get you on their side. And then you would have all the men running out of the house going, "Get the fuck away! Get away from that door!" Scaring them off. Um, and then you go, "Oh, jeez, these people must be really dangerous." And at that time, it kind of was where it's come to an end, and there wasn't that many killings, and it was kind of dying down, but there was always still a threat. And because it happened in the first instance in '69, where people thought that the Brits were there to help them, and it went haywire, and they absolutely ruined people. You look at Bloody Sunday, what happened in Derry, where they were just firing indiscriminately into the crowd. Because our families were there on that day and arrested, and the family members died on that day, that's always just stayed as a fear, and a genuine fear, But these days, maybe since after whenever the 2000s started, or what, that's kind of all died down. Even the sectarianism has died down, and mostly now people only, the sectarianism, as you feel, is just these keyboard warriors online, or politicians who want to just stoke the narrative and just like create that tension because they're losing the power. It's that whole adage of people who have the power all the time, and as soon as you start losing it, you feel like you're losing everything, even though equality to them feels like they're losing their position.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And they have the fear that the same thing is going to happen to them. That if the United Ireland comes about, that they're going to be ousted the way the people were ousted off their lands whenever the planters came back in the 1600s. Like so, but that's not the case, and it's not what we want, and it's not what the people that we know want
Yeah.
of a United Ireland. We want it to be an inclusive thing where everybody can feel safe, everybody can have their own versions of their own cultures, and nobody has to fear a culture or a language. It's not a thing to be feared, it's a thing to be celebrated.
Is it part of the reason why? I mean, I was texting with Rich about this, the director of the film. Even just that unbelievably poignant, small but powerful image of a Palestinian flag flying from a building in the film.
Well, I was going to touch on this earlier when you were talking about like artists in Ireland and talking about the truth. Obviously, in Ireland, you had like I'll come back to that question, but that's kind of as a cross reference. Like Sinead O'Connor
Yeah.
talking about the Catholic Church and coming out and talking about the truth. And I think that the truth is a great weapon that an artist has in talking about the truth. And like this is something that goes back in Ireland for thousands of years. You used to have the poet would be second, like below the king in the Irish system, and he would be a satirist. I can't say
Yeah,
that word.
satirist. Yeah,
Yes.
yeah,
Satirist, and a satirist like would had so much power because they would talk about the truth, and like you needed a good poet who was a good satirist by your side, so he can take down the other king and talk shit about him,
yeah.
and like come up with these things. So I think that's why I think there's a long history of that in Ireland, and like I think it's a natural progression for us to talk about Palestine and to have because we're blessed to be in Ireland now at the moment and to not be in a state of war the way it is in Palestine. And I think it's a natural progression for us to talk about and use our platforms. And it's such a beautiful thing to see bands like Fontaines going on the Rolling Stone and talking about Palestine because there's so many bands who are smaller than them or bigger who don't say fuck all because they're afraid in case something happens. But the fact that the Fontaines are there, talking on some of the biggest platforms in the world, and not caring, it means a lot. And it's a common thing in Ireland. There's not many bands in Ireland who don't speak out, and like it's coming very. Obviously, you've seen the thing with Stormzy and McDonald's. And he did the fucking crazy sponsorship deal and and deleted all his Palestine posts. So I think with the internet, you don't get away with stuff anymore, and if you're not on the right side, people are going to remember it. And I'd say Stormzy, hopefully, will regret that when he's sitting in his golden palace. He'll regret with all his blood money. He'll regret getting sponsored by McDonald's. But yeah, it's a natural thing for us. Yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead, JJ.
I think have been an oppressed people yourselves, like the people of Ireland, and seeing how people going through the same struggles and having the same kind of, even though theirs is on a scale that's fucking far greater.
Yeah.
Like if you think back to 1847, like whenever there was all the food was being shipped out of Ireland, to fight for the English to fight their wars around the world. You know, like the famine happened, and you know there was a blight, but that's not the reason everybody starved and everybody emigrated. It was because the food was being exported. And then you see people like the Choctaw people, the Native Americans, who sent like the equivalent of 1.6 million pound to Ireland to help feed people and to help people pay for tickets to get away and get a better life, even though they themselves were suffering under the hands of imperialism and the Americans at the time. So just seeing that kind of solidarity and that just recognizing humanity, I think it's a massive thing. And even though sometimes you can't help directly, just knowing that there's people have your back can be enough.
I have a couple more on this, but I just need, before I let you go, I need to talk to you about the music itself because that's a big part of this. I just love the music. But the Stormzy thing I find very interesting. But the deleting the posts, his friends saying, people inside his group saying it's not about that. And I just think from the inside, the pressures that an artist must feel. There are people who say that you didn't get the Oscar nomination because they didn't want to hear Free Palestine on stage. And
they're right.
Do you think that's what it was?
100%.
Let them believe it. Even if it's not true, it's true now.
Well, I just find there's this really interesting thing right now where artists who are talking about, like, in that one struggle is all struggles and all struggles are one struggle. And that if there isn't that solidarity, that maybe we're missing a point.
Yeah, I mean, it can be a very tiresome job trying to maintain a certain level of awareness with some bands who don't speak up, and that's one thing. But I think for Stormzy, he's actively going to seek sponsorship and get extra money when he's already a multimillionaire. Is a very bad look. But it is good for bands to be accountable for what they talk about.
Obviously, musicians are a great way to get to get information out there and en masse, you know. But it's really the politicians that need the pressure from the public, you know, and that's what I think that's what the next step should be. So if you're getting your information from the likes of us, the likes of Bob Villan, then you need to be going to your politician and putting them under pressure not to go to the White House, because like Ireland are now fucking letting the US planes land here again, the government, and the people have been on the streets marching for years saying that that's not what we want, and the elected representatives are going against the will of the people, you know, and like that's cause for people to go out in the street and fucking rebel, you know, that's cause for rebellion, that's cause for ousting the politicians who aren't doing the job that needs to be done.
Was there anything in the film or the stories you tell that was a challenge for you to do because of the vulnerability and opening up? And, you know, your father, your mother, like you're telling really, really powerful stories here that involve other people that you love. And I wonder, what is that like for you?
Yeah, it was tough enough. I was the mass story and whatever, and it's strange because you're playing like a sort of version of yourself or a hyper real version. But obviously, you're kind of when you're acting, you're kind of yourself. You're not yourself. But especially in this movie, we're playing like we have our own names in the movie, which was a question when we started the movie. Like we weren't sure about using our own names because obviously we had stage names. We have stage names obviously for the music, and then we had to make a decision: are we going to use our own names or different names? So having our own name made it even more like made the lines blurred them a lot more. So it definitely has challenges, but the fact that Simone Kirby in the movie was like such a nice, like sensitive person and Fassbender as well, and everybody who acted on it, I think everybody was passionate about the story, and they knew when you're treading that fine line of like reality and fiction, like we did, that you have to be careful with it. So, but I think because of that, it gives a certain wealth to the movie and substance. I think what people don't expect when they're watching the Kneecap movie is to have that like emotional beat throughout the movie. And like that's when they leave the movie kind of. I seen somebody crying at it. It's not what it's not what I was expecting to see at a Kneecap movie.
Gach focal Gaelic a literature. She pillar a skilter or some search in the heron. Boris Billy or Shillavik.
Tell me about the phrase, every word of Irish spoken is a bullet for Irish freedom.
It was actually a friend of my father's who came up with it. He called him Pat Rice. He's still going. He's probably in his late 70s now, maybe 80. But he was involved in the Republican movement. And as I was saying, in 1972 was when the first Irish language primary school was started. And I suppose at the time, the Republican movement maybe didn't have as much of a understanding of the power of language and the Irish language in the movement. But he spoke Irish and he was a Republican. So he was on the committee to start the school, and he came out with that phrase, every word Irish spoke is not a bullet. He wanted to kind of, he wanted to make like a parallel there, that the language is just as powerful and maybe in the long run more powerful, or a lot less damaging to people. So that was a phrase that I think every 2 years when there's an article trying to talk shit about the Irish language, that phrase is brought back up again. But I think that's I think also that's a reflection on our generation today, that none of us want it. There's no need for violence. We don't want violence. And that the Irish language can be seen as a powerful tool for, reconnecting with identity and reclaiming the Irish identity and our place in Ireland. Because for a long time, the Irish language, as we were saying for the last half hour, was just decimated in the North of Ireland. We used to have Gaeltachts in South Derry, in Tyrone, in Armagh, but after the state was established, the Irish language was wiped out until, frankly, not completely though.
The live show. Tell me about the live show.
I suppose it's something that we've developed over the last 6 years. Like when we first started making music, that was the first time we were doing music properly on stage. And it was our first gig in 2018, I think. And we were in Gidor and at the Gaeltacht in Donegal. And DJ Proby couldn't get the computer to start. I ran out with the mic to start my verse and forgot to turn the mic on. And I started the gig, and I kind of just turned around and walked out again,
Yeah.
and then did it again. It was our first gig, and I didn't want to. I wanted a fresh start. So I mean, we made lots of mistakes on the way, but I think because of that, we kind of learned in the deep end and developed a certain energy on stage, and we like to give people,
Yep.
like, if you don't speak Irish, you do speak Irish. Even if you don't speak Irish, you can sing along with some of the words. You can jump around. You have a mosh pit. You can have the crack, and we always have a good mix of genders at the gigs.
Yep.
It's not just a big hack fest, because there's
Yeah.
some hip hop gigs. I suppose maybe I went to in Ireland that it's just a load of fellas
Yeah.
like bumping cocks. So that's something that's an atmosphere we like to maintain. Is like that everybody can can join in and have the
Yeah.
crack.
Yep.
Uh,
Kneecap's 10 rules to live by are great. The one that I love the most is there's a value to friends, culture, language, relationships, that money people can't make a profit off of.
That's a fact. That's a fact. I suppose everything's like fucking. What's the word? Economized? No,
Commodified, yeah.
modified. Yeah, and like the price put and everything. And I think that's in a sense a challenge that we have with like language, minority language, and culture.
Mhm.
It's always compared to something that has more financial value.
Yeah.
Like you say in Ireland all the time, like, why learn Irish when you can learn Chinese and get a job in China?
Yeah.
If that's no interest in going to China, but that's the kind of thought process people always have. But the reality is, I think people are looking that way. Is like young people are wanting more,
Yeah.
something with more substance, because everything we have like super capitalism now. It's just like your phone's listening to you mention a fucking like a certain cup when you're to your friend, and there's like 10 ads
Yep.
about this fucking winter fucking cup that has warm water for 20 days. So I think that's why we're always pushing this thing about culture and language, because it can't be taken away from people, because it's for people to enjoy.
Yeah.
And it's not be commodified.
Yeah.
Hopefully.
Yeah.
Yeah, hopefully. Yeah, that is the key here. I really appreciate your time today. Guys, thank you so much. Thanks for giving us
Thanks
some
very much, Josh.
No problem at all. Thank you very much. Hopefully we'll see you soon.